Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now moving to the session 2. And today's session 2 will be started with a topic on probiotics, which is a very known topic to everybody. But still, there is lots of things to discuss on this. And we have our speaker, Dr. Bhaskar Raju, who is really an expert on this topic. Dr. Bhaskar Raju is one of the pioneer pediatric gastroenterologists in India, and he was the former professor and head of the Department of Pediatric Gastroenterology in the Institute of Child Health and HC in Chennai. Today, he is a practicing pediatric gastroenterologist in Chennai. So, without further losing any time, we just hand over to Dr. Bhaskar Raju to talk on probiotics.
Hi, everybody. Today's discussion is on probiotics, what is new. 2014 guidelines for Espagan, issued by Espagan, on the use of probiotics in acute watery diarrhea, elevated probiotics from possible mumbo-jumbo to a recognized modality of treatment for pediatric illnesses. This particular paper, of course, looked at only acute watery diarrhea and the use of probiotics in them. And 6 years down the line, they have come up with an upgraded version of the same guidelines, more or less similar. I'll touch upon what the differences are in one of the subsequent slides. During the 6 years, a lot had happened in probiotics. We had this paper by Iva Hojsak, she is from Zagreb, Croatia, which is a review article which looked at several publications, not only in acute watery diarrhea and probiotics, but also several other indications in pediatrics as well. Authors from Italy, Romania, Germany, France, making it a pan-European recommendation. We also had the Cochrane review came up about a year ago, which seriously looked at probiotics for the prevention of pediatric antibiotic-associated diarrhea, and they felt that it was useful. Then we had this probiotics and prebiotics, virtually a treatise by World Gastroenterology Organization, published about 3 years ago, which is basically on adult use of probiotics, but almost about 20 pages on pediatric use of probiotics as well. And what is common between all of those, and what is the summary of these recommendations? Recommendation 1, acute watery diarrhea is the best known indication for probiotics. The 2 organisms that are definitely useful are Lactobacillus GG and Saccharomyces boulardii. A couple more are also mentioned in the 2020 guidelines. I'll show them in the next slide. Antibiotic associated diarrhea, the next most important use of probiotics in pediatric practice, but here only LGG and SD are recommended. Nosocomial sepsis, yes, to a certain extent probiotics are useful. LGG is the only one that is recommended. Daycare infections, DICE, not a major effect with using long-term probiotics in children who go into daycare. FGIDs, when it came to infant colic, Lactobacillus reuteri has decent data suggesting it may be useful, especially in breastfed infants. For older children with functional chronic abdominal pain, both Lactobacillus reuteri and LGG have some data, but not very useful. The 2020 guidelines for acute gastroenteritis, besides S. boulardii and Rhamnosus GG, also recommends Lactobacillus reuteri, DSM, and Lactobacillus rhamnosus, another strain 19070, in the descending order as it specifically says. Surprisingly, they say don't use Lactobacillus helveticus. They even go to the extent say don't even use Bacillus clausii. It's a very popular probiotic used extensively in India as well as in Europe, but for some reason, the Espagan guidelines say don't use it. Now, this kind of tells you what you already know. So I will not spend any more time on these indications. We'll go to the more important ones today in Corona and COVID era. What about probiotics in respiratory infections? 5 years ago, we had this Cochrane review, which dealt with probiotic use not only in adults, but also 3 or 4 randomized controlled trials of use in children as well. And it did give a very sanguine report on the use of probiotics. You can see here, while on probiotics, the number of people who had at least 1 URTA came down from 30 to 19. The number of people who were forced to receive prescriptions of antibiotics came down from 20 to 9. Even the duration of URTAs came down from 7 to 5. Almost 20% of the cases described were children. 1 year down the line, we had this systematic review by the group from Turkey. They looked at all the articles which did randomized controlled trials of probiotics in prevention and alleviation of upper respiratory tract infections. And their recommendation is also equally sanguine. They're saying, yes, it can be used. This review showed that probiotics have an impact on decreasing the incidence of URTIs and the severity of symptoms. And they, in fact, go on to say that it's extremely safe and can be used to reduce the incidence of respiratory infections. I thought I'll include this paper also. This is from Chengdu, China, right from the heart of corona territory, where they have looked at several controlled trials which have used probiotics to prevent ventilator-associated pneumonias. There are 2 papers from China, several papers from Europe, South America, and several other parts of the world as well. They actually say, yes, it is likely to be useful in preventing ventilator-associated pneumonias. And they even go on to say, specifically Bifidobacter brevi and KCA combination, and Bacillus subtilis and ENT fecalis combination as well are likely to be useful. Of course, most of these studies were done on adults. There were, of course, a few randomized control trials included here on children as well. Now, moving away from that, what else is new in probiotics? Intranasal administration of probiotics. This is a review article published from Kentucky by Thomas S. Higgins. He's a microbiologist there. He looked at several papers where instead of giving antivirals IV or oral, they administered it intranasally. And apparently it was quite effective. Along with that, he also looked at 3 or 4 articles which used probiotics just like antivirals intranasally. And there are a lot of data in this article which I can't show here, but the concluding sentence from here in this article is intranasal administration of antivirals do reduce the severity of lung involvement in COVID, can be tried for probiotics also. So that's one more new thing in probiotics. They depended a lot on this one particular study from Argentina, Tucumán University, where they primed rats with Lactobacillus rhamnosus infiltrated into their nostrils. And 3 days later, they infected them with rat H1 influenza virus. And look at the state of the lungs. The ones which received the probiotics, lungs are reasonably good, safe, not infected by H influenza, the influenza virus, while the control group, there is fair amount of alveolar damage, showing that intranasal administration can definitely work. The question now arises, how do probiotics actually help in viral infections? Those who are interested in the pathogenesis of protection, I would recommend this particular article. This is from Canada, which is several pages long. It's really difficult to understand, but I'll just pick up one very illustrative cartoon from that article, which tells you the different ways in which the probiotics help. Antimicrobial production, adhesion prevention, mucin generation, secretory IgA production, conversion of Th2 cells into cells that produce IgG, conversion of CD8 to cytotoxic lymphocytes, and several others. I've just mentioned it here because I didn't want the slide to get more crowded. One more takeaway from this article, which I found very interesting, was they said each probiotic has its own way of protecting. Not all of them work the same way. In fact, they even specified increased phagocytosis by L. acidophilus, NK cell activity by rhamnosus. You can see here several ways in which protection occurs, but each probiotic has its own way of handling viral infections. This is another interesting article I ran into about a couple of years ago when I was preparing for another talk on probiotics, and I really didn't go through it in detail because it didn't seem like something very interesting. But today, in COVID era, postnatal exposure to household disinfectants has become a major issue. This article was very interesting. They picked up 2 cohorts of newborn babies, both breastfed and artificially fed. One belonged to parents who are extremely hygiene-centric. They were using at least 2 or 3 times a day alcohol-based or chemical-based disinfectants for surface, for the clothes, and for the hands every day. While the other group used what they call as eco-friendly sanitization, which is using soap or synthetic detergents, nothing else, no chemicals being used. They followed the microbiota of these children all the way up to 1 year of age. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, they did find a significant difference. Of course, you may not be able to read the slide well. I'll summarize it for you in the next slide. There were distinct differences in certain certain microbiota in the GI tract. You see here, almost about a dozen of them, the numbers were significantly less. And do they really mean anything? They probably do. I'm sure they do certainly mean something. And is there anything we can do about it? We'll come to that in the next few slides. We would have heard this word Generation C. This is a word which is repeatedly used, or a term which is repeatedly used to describe the millennials, those who were born after 2000. They are called Generation C because they are connected consumers. They are very creative. Curation means they are extremely well organized. Communication is what they are experts in, always in communication. But when I say Generation C, I don't mean them. I mean these babies. Generation C babies are babies born in the COVID era. They're all born with a handicap. What handicap are they born with? Very sanitized environment. We have people using sanitizers 8 to 10 times a day, not only on the clothes, not only on the surfaces in their hands. Sometimes I've even had mothers spraying the babies with the sanitizers. Terrible. Lack of exposure to environmental germs, cocooned, non-exposure to people except parents, increased screen time, a terrible thing to happen to these babies when they grow up. More ADHD, more autism, I'm sure is in the cards. No exposure to routine infections and lack of stimulatory play. Can it all lead to atopy, allergy, autoimmune disease, and obesity being increased? I'm almost 100% certain, yes, it will be. Is there anything we can do about it? Will long-term probiotics help in preventing this? I was going through the literature trying to see if anybody has attempted. Then I realized there are a lot of people who are looking at it. Only a few papers have been published. You can see the names. Professor Sarah Lieber, one of the founder members of Microbiological Society, a leading microbiologist from Belgium. Professor Gregor Reid, he is the founder, president of World Probiotics Association based in Canada. They're all looking at it. One review article has, of course, come out. It came out about a couple of months ago, which looked at long-term probiotic supplementation during perinatal and infant period. Is it useful? Does it have any benefits for the child? It finally answers that question. Yes, it is useful. It says gut dysbiosis can definitely be improved. Gut colonization tends to go towards healthy germs when you use long-term perinatal and infantile probiotics. Prevention of atopy, yes, useful. Prevention of food allergy, yes, useful. Asthma, wheeze, and rhinitis, dicey, not particularly useful. They recommend LGG, L. reuteri, and a few other Bifidobacter species. The rest of them, they say, has no significant effect. It's a very interesting information we need to know. In fact, I'm seriously thinking whether I should put all my COVID babies on long-term probiotics to prevent long-term bad influence of the wrong microbiota generating within them. Now, can probiotics be used to flatten the corona disease? I was telling you about Gregor Reid earlier. It's a paper from his center. They have looked at almost 20 to 30 randomized control trials, some of them using children, most of them using adults, where they have used long-term probiotics, see if it can reduce. Apparently, yes. They've even identified a few probiotics and said Lactobacillus casei, gasseri, GG, plantarum, Bifidobacter brevi, and longum. These are all bacteria or probiotics which have had minimum 2 RCTs and well controlled and well done RCTs, and this is the result of this particular study. I'm fairly certain, yes, probiotic use during this illness is definitely beneficial in flattening the curve. What else is new in probiotics? New names. Yes, from come January, you will have a lot of these familiar lactobacilli having completely new names. This is an article by Sarah Lebir. I mentioned her earlier. She, on behalf of Microbiological Society, which is an umbrella organization which includes all microbiological societies all over the world, they looked at the genus Lactobacillus and they said, my God, it has a lot of genuses which are not a part of Lactobacillus at all DNA-wise or evolution-wise, and they decided to split it into several groups, and some of the popular ones which you and I are familiar with will continue to have different names from 1st of January. Like Lactobacillus casei becomes Lacticaceae, Bacillus casei. Then we have Lactiplanti for Plantarum, Levilacto for Lactobacillus brevis, Legilacto for Lactobacillus salivarius, and Limosilacto for Fermentum. I mean, commercially, very unlikely that companies are going to change the name of their probiotics. But if you're planning to do research or publish papers from next year onwards, you may need to use these words, and it's better you are familiar with them now. I'm sure pediatricians will find it impossible to pronounce it. What next is new? Probiotics and preterm infants. It's almost 15 years since a series of papers came from Australia from Girish Deshpande's group, which categorically said use probiotics to prevent NEC in the preterms and immediate newborn period up to 6 weeks or even 8 weeks. And there are a lot of objections at that time, yes and no's. There are a lot of papers which said yes, useful, not useful. Finally, a couple of months ago, the European Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology did a complete review of all the articles that are published, and now they have come out with these recommendations. Yes, probiotics can be used in preterm infants. Yes, probiotics are useful. I'll show you a slide which summarizes this particular slide. Recommended probiotics, only 2 of them. Lactobacillus GG, this particular strain, which is the common strain which we all see commercially available in India. Then there is a combination of Bifidobacter infantis, lactis, and Streptococcus thermophilus. These are the only two which are likely to be of use in preventing NEC. They've even recommended the dose and the duration for which it is to be given. So, summarizing the last 15 minutes, whatever I've said, probiotics can definitely reduce the severity of URI, LRTA during this COVID period and even reduce ventilator pneumonias. Its antiviral effects have been well elucidated, but very specific for each probiotic. Two probiotics don't work the same way. Sanitized corona environment is bound to impact the baby's microflora in the years to come. And as pediatricians, we need to do something. And one way of preventing that is using long-term probiotics throughout the corona period. Specific probiotics have been recommended by ESPGHAN to decrease NEC in preterms. And we do have finally a review article which clearly says perinatal and infantile long-term administration of probiotics definitely has its benefits. Thank you.